Thanks for sticking with us, folks. Let's head to South America, specifically the country of Brazil. If you haven't heard yet, Brazil has been erupting major clashes between the country's corrupt government and its citizens. This all began with their presidential election, which many in that country believed was rigged, resulting in convicted felon and socialist Lula da Silva being placed in office as president. Ever since then, protests have been erupting across the country, led by supporters of their former president, you remember him from when Trump was in, Bolsonaro. So, who's right, the people, the government? People of Brazil believe the election was stolen by Lula and his fellow socialists, and they are unhappy with the theft of their democracy. With that, they've been taken to the streets in protest, which has led to a massive group of unhappy voters entering Brazil's congressional building this past week. Look at this. Of course, the left's first action was to compare these events with January 6th. And folks in our country started calling this an attempted coup and an attack on Brazil's democracy. During the same time, the current president, again, the convicted felon socialist, Lula's police have arrested over 1,500 protesters. They fired tear gas into crowds. They've beaten them with billy clubs. Yes, protesters have been killed by police officers and military down there. Again, this is all at the order of their president. Meanwhile, 2 days before his term ended, the defeated Bolsonaro flew to Florida. We're told he's been there ever since, leading to a very difficult scenario for their government there, his supporters there, and of course our government and how we're treating this whole scenario that's happening in Brazil. With the protests currently settling down a bit this week, Lula's gaining momentum on the response to the protests, including personally accusing the former president, Bolsonaro, of instigating these riots. We're told President Biden might help out with this, though, because he, of course, is siding with the current regime that's in control in Brazil. Matter of fact, saying on Twitter this, I condemn the assault on democracy and on the peaceful transfer of power in Brazil. Brazil's democratic institutions have our full support, and the will of the Brazilian people must not be undermined. I look forward to continuing to work with Lula, end quote. Again, from our alleged president. So it could be that Biden and the Lula sympathizers will work to maybe extradite Bolsonaro from our country back to Brazil and then charge him with something. Again, does all this sound familiar? To get the very latest on the intense situation happening in Brazil right now, we're joined by political activist, commentator and journalist on Brazilian politics, Ricardo Martins. Ricardo, thank you so much for joining us here on Real America. Truly appreciate it. I would say this looks like a powder keg getting ready to explode, but it looks like it's already exploded, and now there's just a different explosion every other day. However, I'm getting reports that the protests have died down. Is that in fact true? Because I don't know that we're getting all the accurate media reports from your country into ours.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me here. Yes, it is happening. The people are still on the streets. Even the truck drivers are now stopping many highways in the country, and the media is covering it up. This is the same pattern that happened here in 2020. We should not forget this. And actually, what's happening right now, we have to remember this. Lula da Silva, he was convicted by 19 judges out of 12 charges against him, and he's running for presidency. We have to imagine this situation. How is to have Donald Trump as a president of the United States and having Nicolás Maduro Supreme Court? The problem in Brazil, it's the Supreme Court. And the generals also betrayed the people in Brazil. And this is why, for the first time in history, we have a concentration camp in Brazil, and the federal police gymnasium, and the headquarters of the federal police.
Wow. And
people died there. And actually, the information that we have from insiders is the lady, she had a heart attack, and she was conducted to the nearest hospital, and she passed away. We have children who was arrested, and a 9-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl was arrested, and even a dog was arrested within, yes, they call themselves terrorists.
Well, when you start talking about socialists and communists, nothing surprises me. Doesn't matter if it's in America or in your country, sir. These socialists and these communists are bat crazy. Let's be real. I mean, arresting kids and a dog. That's probably what's coming next to this country. I mean, we still have political prisoners in a D.C. gulag-style jail because they were on the steps of our house. Didn't damage anything, didn't hurt anyone, but there are people still in a jail. You know, we're talking 2 years later because they walked through our house or they stood on steps. So it would make sense in a country like yours where things are a bit more wilder than even America, they're arresting dogs and kids. I mean, this is insane. Now, this all sparked, of course, because of the election, similar to what happened here in our country. And we know that President Trump and your former President Bolsonaro got along well. They had some and many similarities, right? Do you feel, and what has pointed to cause the uprising? Like, what was that last straw that broke the camel's back? Was there evidence of election tampering that day of, or stuff that led up? But what really set this whole powder keg off where they believed your elections were rigged as well?
Remember, 2018, Lula, he was arrested and he was taken out of jail by a Supreme Court judge. We have to imagine this. 9 out of 11 judges are socialists, and they were put in there by Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff. They're all socialists, and they're going to stand for what is right. We have a tribunal called Electoral Court, which is the chief judge, Alexandre de Moraes, that sits as the head of the Supreme Electoral Court. He is against Bolsonaro 100%. And we knew this situation was coming against her after 2020 elections in America. And the people went to the streets after the election results because we were preparing for this. But now what's coming next, we actually don't know yet, but we are preparing. We have for first time in history a conservative and right-wing Senate and the Chamber of Congress in Brazil for first time in history. But now, with Alexandre de Moraes, with so much power in hands, we never know what's going to happen.
Wow. All right, Ricardo, do me a favor. Please stay in touch with my producers. Let us know as things escalate down there, because I know this is far from over, because from what I'm hearing and seeing reports and listening to you, the Brazilian people are not going to just give up easy on this one. I mean, they want their rights. They want a free and fair election. And it sounds like you've got some corruption down there, possibly worse than America's dealing with. Ricardo Martins, political activist, commentator, and journalist for Brazilian politics. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you for standing with us, Dan.
Of course. Take care.